So Fire Force coming in with a very enjoyable and emotionally gripping episode this week. It's not surprising that we didn't have a full-on villain within this captain and she had to be put down for good and she saw the light eventually. That's, I think, what many people were expecting. But I do think the overall execution to the backstory, what led her to be so twisted and demonic, it made sense, it was believable, and I thought it was heartfelt, especially with the resolution. There definitely was shonen design to it, especially with Shinra saying, "I'm the hero, just call my name, I'll fly down from the sky." It's very cliche in that sense, but I think Shinra is just such an interesting character that he kind of rolls with that just gimmick exceptionally well because he's a victim himself, and I think the idea of taking the thing that took everything from him and using that to be a hero to help others, it's something that's quite respectable as well as admirable, that you just kind of want to follow in his footsteps and say, you know what, if he's saying he's going to be the hero for everyone, you kind of want to believe it. This episode, it did something that was quite interesting overall, because to have a character who was seemingly as sick and twisted as this, how could you make them human? Walk out of an episode saying, we can let them be a captain and feel like they're a good person. It's not an easy thing to do, and I think the overall explanation and execution to this is why it was so great. Because you have people who are a part of this orphanage, they were kind of following in the footsteps of God, and then everything's taken away from you, and you only have seemingly 2 survivors. It's understandable why your kind of faith in God would go out the window, especially if you weren't even the most serious about praying to God throughout most of your training. You're more interested in your flames and things like that, and to have everything stripped away from you, it would shatter most minds. Even if you aren't a kid, even if you're maybe a teenager, a young adult, it's going to shatter most minds. And for some people, they're going to take comfort in that religion, and for others, they're going to push back against it. I do like the little cue where you get a grin that's very similar to Shinra, especially when he lost his family. You can understand the pain and torment. For Shinra, he started to walk in the path of the people who helped him, and then as we see with her, she got very twisted, and she started thinking that there was only one way. It was testing, taking those flames. If anyone gets in your way, you would stomp on them. You understand the perspective. It doesn't justify some of her actions and her just what she was doing to some people and how far she went, but you understand that she wasn't so far gone that she couldn't come back and maybe be someone who was respectable. Of course, she also got a little flustered with Shinra, so that played a factor in it, but I think that's why it was such an interesting episode overall. Her and Iris had a very close connection back in the day, and that whole idea that she wouldn't show her the flame flowers that she was kind of like mesmerized by until she was no longer shy, and then at the end of the episode she shows her that, it just kind of ties together that past sequence and the present so well that you just kind of feel like even though she clearly was sick and twisted, because of her heart being mended in the proper way, both with someone who she had a deep connection with in the past and someone she actually is kind of looking at as being a hero, something she wasn't believing in, because where were the heroes when she needed them to save everyone within their church? It's something that you just kind of want to get behind. There's definitely elements of classic shonen in what you've seen before, but I think the execution, especially with the setting with the whole Fire Force, is something that kind of makes it feel special in its own way. And the personalities are just so interesting. Even when she was sick and twisted, it was an interesting personality. It's something that you wanted to watch because you're like, where's this persona's going to go? And then you see by the end of the episode, and just the whole idea that they make it look like it was a training exercise, make their group look like they were pretending to be the villains, but then at the end of the credits, you see that the captain was preparing all this time, then he gets the phone call that the mission's already done. I just love how it can blend humor and serious drama all at the same time, and I quite like that. I wasn't surprised by the fact that when we did see their church burning and the people inside burning, they kind of covered half the screen with black bars. That's not surprising. I expect that going forward after the Kyoto Animation fire, so that's not surprising in the slightest. But the fact that the only thing that seemingly is getting blocked out is people burning alive, I think that's perfectly fine in my honest opinion. But the overall fight, I have to say, the overall way they can take, everyone has flame powers, but they keep finding new ways to make it feel different. A lot of times with anime, when they have elemental abilities, they give different characters different elements to work with, fire, water, ground, because everyone will have a unique set of powers. Here with Fire Force, it's seemingly most of the people, obviously not everyone has abilities, their captain doesn't have an ability, but those who do, they're all based on fire. And it's interesting how they're still able to feel like they're giving each character a unique set of traits that feel visually distinct, but also they function distinct with the written capabilities. Here we see her do something which is probably my favorite move we've seen in Fire Force. A sakura tree and the leaves are just floating down, and when they touch you, they burn you. That was one of the most beautiful and badass things I've seen in quite some time, especially with Fire Force. It's something that you think, how can you dodge that? It's literally petals falling in every direction, Unless you're literally the size of a toothpick, how are you going to avoid those? And it's not like it's major damage, but if you keep getting hit by those, that's going to knock you out and do some serious damage over time. That was such a beautiful and just really creative way to kind of capture who she is at her core, but how twisted she can be when she's pushed off the deep end. You have the character who was built on showing people the beauty in flames and not taking life or doing anything corrupt, and now with her current persona, she's someone who will crush anyone who gets in her way. And you're seeing this beautiful sakura tree just do such vile things, and I think it really captures both the present as well as the past and what it was trying to represent with her very complex character at the end of the day. Her introduction was pretty kind of typical cliche of what you would expect with a psychotic character. Deep down there was something troubling her, and I think the way they explored her turned her into a character who was very likable, who was fleshed out, and had actually something deep about her past just being someone who wanted to stomp on people and make them into basically her slaves. And that's why I love it, especially with Shinra. Like, the whole idea that she could basically put this envelope around them and make them just so exhausted, they would have basically no blood pressure. It was something that you felt like the will of the person really was the deciding factor there. She was strong for sure, but someone like Shinra, who is so kind of like bound and bent to be a hero, you understand why he would keep getting back up, and the entire reason he was able to land that punch was because she was shocked. Heroes like him shouldn't exist. Heroes like him are fantasy and fiction, and those who try to be that will get stomped on. And the fact that he kept continuously getting up is what shocked her enough to let her guard down momentarily, and that's why he could get that sucker punch in. And I think that's all she really needed. She needed a slap to the face to wake her up to the reality of the world, and that yes, she has suffered, but that doesn't mean she has to suffer alone. And that's what I like about the writing to this show, is it has everything that a classic shonen would have in terms of the character relationships, the archetypes, and just what they do with the hero rising up, but the way they're executing it, it does feel a tad special, and I think the visual presentation does play a huge factor into that. But really seeing how the character personalities are flourishing, even though we're seeing the typical hero formula, it truly is gripping me like only a few anime as of late have been able to do, and that's why I really enjoy Fire Force overall. The flames, if we ignore the one section where there was some black bars, like they're continuing to allow the flames to be vibrant, in your face, move as if they are realistic flames. And when they do have to go more mystical with controlling it, if it's like a tree leaf or if it is something like coming out of his feet and they're doing these crazy maneuvers, they find these ways to make each flame feel personal, as if when a character is doing a different flame attack, not only does it just function different, whether it be the tree or Shinra having to use his legs almost like a jetpack, it feels as if the way the flames kind of move, it actually has a personality alongside the character that's using it, which is something that I think is pretty important, especially because not only are they giving the abilities different ways that they can use them, they're making them feel different, so even though we just keep seeing flame after flame after flame, it does feel like there's a character behind those flames, and I think because we are looking at so much fire, it's important that they did that. And that's why you can tell that they're definitely taking their time. I heard well before this anime started airing that it did have a pretty good production schedule, and I think the idea that the flames are so vibrant, so different and unique, I think that's where this time really went into. Not just like the general character animation, it's how much flames have to be a part of this, and they didn't want to rely on stock footage and things like that if they didn't have to, and I think the quality is showing because of that. I definitely think though the voice acting for the past sequence might have been the star of the voice acting in this episode. There was something so innocent and pure. You knew ultimately what was going to happen. You've seen the burned images. You knew they were, for a majority of these characters, were going to burn alive. But that sequence when they were all just looking at the flowers, it just felt so wholesome and innocent, and then the transition to just crushing sorrow, especially with the visuals and how they would detail such a broken character, it really felt like it was such a human moment despite having some supernatural elements surrounding it, especially with the whole manipulation as she does have, and how she ultimately rose to be a captain by showing her data that was like shocking them, make me captain, give me the research. You just felt like this was a character who I myself was saying like, you know, I like her character, but she's despicable, and I thought I knew what to expect. But then Fire Force showed me that she was a lot more multi-layered than I was first giving her credit to, and that's why I really like Fire Force. It does know how to rely on the tropes and gimmicks that have hooked a lot of people with shonens over the years, but it does have its own unique personality and originality that does allow it to elevate into something that I think is quite memorable. I'm sure if you remove the visual flair that this show did have and give it to a different studio with not a great schedule as this one did have, I'm sure it wouldn't be nearly as popular as it currently is, but I don't think the visuals is what's hooking me. It truly is the personalities and the characters and the overall mystery of what's truly going on in this world and where the main objective wants to go by the end of its first season. I thought this was a very fun episode overall, definitely the most personal and emotional, and even though it had that generic hero formula, it's something that feels so special for Fire Force that you just want to believe in Shinra, believe in his dream, And even though he is going to struggle, he also is going to be a badass when it counts, and I think this episode is a great showcase of that. But what did everyone think of this week's episode of Fire Force? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What did you think of the formula and just overall execution that it went for? Let me know down in the comment section below. If you did enjoy this video though, be sure to drop a like and also hit that subscribe button if you have been new. So until next time everyone, please take care and have a good one.